Hello and thank you very much for joining us here at Data Cloud Europe 2015 in Monaco. My name's Stephen Pritchard and our guest now is Emma Fryer, who is an Associate Director at TechUK with responsibility for climate change. Emma, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Just before we get into the detail of this conversation, could you just briefly outline what TechUK does for the benefit of anyone in the audience who might not be familiar?
Okay, well, we're a trade association representing companies. We represent the digital technology sector in the UK, and we're broad-based, which means we represent software, hardware, IT services providers, consumer electronics, manufacturers and suppliers, and of course data centres, and my job actually is to look after data centres in the UK.
And now you've been looking at the potential impact of regulation on the data centre industry. What's your view at the moment? Do you think that we're going to see a period of intense regulatory change, and is that going to cause problems?
Rather than intense regulatory change, I think more of the same. So gradually, I think the regulatory clouds have been thickening, so to speak. So we're getting more and more of stuff we've already got, and then new stuff's being added. And then my concern, I suppose, is that the data centre sector itself, the business models are evolving, they're getting more complicated. So people who used to do colo are now thinking about doing cloud, and people are adding different levels of service. And what a lot of people are not aware of is that you add a new level of service and you might make yourself vulnerable to a set of regulation either that's new or that you've never heard of but it's been around for a long time. So I'd say those are issues of great concern.
So, for example, if you move into running cloud applications, you're then moving into areas of data privacy and personal identifiable information, which probably, if you're providing just physical infrastructure, wasn't an issue?
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
So how do the business leaders in the sector deal with this?
I think variably, it really depends what kind of resource you've got to look at it, but I think that some companies are just not aware that they're obliged under regulations because they've never heard of those regulations and they always used to operate a data centre, they've added a couple of services. Why would that suddenly change things? But in fact it does, particularly in areas of data protection. I think that's an absolute classic.
So it's not just a question of regulatory creep, if indeed that's what's happening, it's actually businesses expanding what they're doing and then finding them moving into different regulatory territory?
Yes, I think, yes, there's definitely those two factors. I think there's also another factor which I would say is that we are a rapidly growing, very energy intensive sector. We happen to underpin the digital economy. I think we are going to attract the attention of regulators whether we like it or not. I just cannot see that not doing that will be an option. So that will happen anyway, that will attract attention in our own right as a sector. And I certainly see that focus coming in on data centres now, particularly at European level, perhaps less so at UK level.
Now on the energy side though, data centres are a significant consumer of power. There's no getting around that. What should businesses be doing in the first instance to establish their baseline energy use and energy efficiency, and then how they might find themselves entangled in regulation? Yes,
I think that helps, and we do have certain tools in the industry. None of them are perfect for doing that, and most of them are misused. So the great and good PUE, a great system for measuring the improvement of a site against itself over time, not a great thing to compare different sites. The other issue perhaps is that we cannot yet look at how effectively the power is actually being used, how productively in terms of activity within the sector. And I think that's one of our sort of big $64,000 questions. I'm not sure we're going to get very close to that, so we have to use these proxies in the meantime. I think governments are going to be very interested in KPIs or proxy KPIs. So I think we've got something that works at the moment. There is going to be an intense focus on developing different ways and better ways of doing that. At the moment I don't see a silver bullet for that at all. But I do think we need to be transparent about the way we use energy. And I also think there's a lot of confusion, particularly at external levels, between the actual energy we use and the energy we're provisioned for. And I think sometimes people make a mistake of multiplying the provision power by 8760 and assuming that's what a data centre is used in a year. And then we get some very strange estimates of power consumption. And I've seen some really weird estimates of sector energy consumption that I just don't know where they come from, but I think they're made up.
So there's the question of measurement, and then there's the question that irrespective of the system you're using for measuring, most policymakers want that energy use to come down. How do we do that?
I'm not sure we will do that at the moment without there being a major change in technology. What I want to see is that power is being used productively. So I don't necessarily want to see the sector reducing its power consumption per se if what the sector is doing is providing technologies and enabling solutions that allow us to do things in a more efficient way. That's not always the case, but quite often it is. So trying to find out what the net benefit of these technologies are is a really, really tricky thing. I wouldn't want to be given that as a project for sure, but it is something we're going to need to do over the next few years. I'd say it's unsolved as yet. Some work's gone on, but no, we're nowhere near an answer really.
Of course, so if you move a workload that's inefficient into the cloud, you increase energy consumption in the cloud computing environment, but you might be saving several times that energy in the business by replacing, say, paper process.
Absolutely. So a lot of that's exactly the kind of argument you can. What you want to make sure, though, is that you get your system boundaries in the right place. So, for instance, if you do something that is much more efficient and you reduce the energy of that thing, what you want to make sure is you don't do 4 times as much of it because you can. And I think there is sometimes a temptation to do that, and that we call those rebound factors, so that instead of doing what you used to do but more efficiently, you add on a whole load of other stuff that you didn't do. So, and I think I can see that trend emerging in the a lot of the digital data that's being put around. A lot of the it's very easy and it is cost-free effectively to the user to put up very high density video data at no cost, and therefore you're not getting a price signal on the energy that's being used. So I think some of those issues may come home to roost in the next few years. I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me.
And nonetheless, though, we have to work with the regulation that we have.
Yeah.
What should the CIOs in your member organisations be doing to ensure that they are compliant?
One of the schemes we've got in the UK, which is we negotiated, it took us 4 years to negotiate, is a climate change agreement. That requires companies, it's aimed at co-location operators, that requires companies to record a baseline PUE, and they have to measure the PUE in a particular way, which is, I think it's along the Green Grid 2 model. It's a total energy consumption, not a spot measurement, not any of those things. And then they have to meet fairly exacting efficiency improvement targets, which are set depending on their baseline PUE. So if you've got a high baseline PUE, you get a bigger reduction target. If you've got a low baseline PUE, it's lower. And that scheme's proving quite interesting just because of the amount of additional data we're getting about the sector that we didn't have before. We're getting really, really useful data on how much energy actually people are using for the first time ever. We've never known that at a collective basis. And then we're seeing some quite interesting areas of improvement. We're also seeing some issues with the way that we're measuring PUE, which are going to, we're going to have to iron out, so it's not perfect. But I'd say that's been a useful route for some people, and actually it demonstrates a commitment to doing this to government, so that they can see that's happening. For legal compliance, it's legal compliance. You have to do it. The CCA scheme is non-obligatory, so you only don't have to do it. But I think I've been quite encouraged by the take-up of that from the colo operators.
Emma Fryer from TechUK, thanks very much.
You're very welcome.